The book Psychology and Religion, West and East, written by Carl Jung, mentioned the following about dreams. Dreams are the voice of the unknown, ever threatening new schemes, new dangers, sacrifices, warfare, and other troublesome things. There is an amount of magical rites that exist for the sole purpose of erecting a defense against the unexpected, dangerous tendencies of the unconscious. The peculiar fact that the dream is a divine voice and messenger and yet an unending source of trouble does not disturb the primitive mind in the least. We find obvious remnants of this primitive thinking in the psychology of the Hebrew prophets. Often enough they hesitate to listen to the voice of the divine. Since the dawn of humanity there has been a marked tendency to limit this unruly and arbitrary, supernatural, influence by means of definite forms and laws. And this process has continued throughout history in the form of a multiplication of rites, institutions, and beliefs. During the last 2,000 years we find the institution of the Christian Church taking over a mediating and protective function between these influences and man. It is not denied in medieval ecclesiastical writings that a divine influx may occur in dreams, but this view is not exactly encouraged, and the Church reserves the right to decide whether a revelation is to be considered authentic or not. See the footnote number 12 of Jung's book. About the dream that Jung analyzed he said, quote, "The dreamer was another intellectual, of remarkable intelligence and learning. He was neurotic and was seeking my help because he felt that his neurosis, which is an outdated umbrella term for mental distress that causes significant suffering but doesn't involve a break from reality, unlike psychosis, had become overpowering and was slowly but surely undermining his morale. Fortunately his intellectual integrity had not yet suffered and he had the free use of his fine intelligence. For this reason I set him the task of observing and recording his dreams himself. The dreams were not analyzed or explained to him and it was only very much later that we began their analysis. Thus the dreams I am going to relate have not been tampered with at all. They represent an entirely uninfluenced natural sequence of events. The patient had never read any psychology, much less any analytical psychology. Since the series consists of over 400 dreams, I could not possibly convey an impression of the whole material, but I have published elsewhere a selection of 74 dreams containing motifs of special religious interest. For this consult Jung's book, Dream Symbols of the Individuation Process and Psychology and Alchemy. The dreamer, it should be said, was a Catholic by education, but no longer a practicing one, nor was he interested in religious problems. He was one of those scientifically minded intellectuals who would be simply amazed if anybody should saddle them with religious views of any kind. If one holds that the unconscious has a psychic existence independent of consciousness, a case such as that of our dreamer might be of particular interest, provided we are not mistaken in our conception of the religious character of certain dreams. One cannot expect dreams to speak of religion as we know it. There are, however, 2 dreams among the 400 that obviously deal with religion. I will now give the text which the dreamer himself had taken down.
All the houses have something theatrical about them, with stage scenery and decorations. The name of Bernard Shaw is mentioned. The play is supposed to take place in the distant future. There is a notice in English and German on one of the sets. This is the Universal Catholic Church. It is the Church of the Lord. All those who feel that they are the instruments of the Lord may enter. Under this is printed in smaller letters, "The church was founded by Jesus and Paul," like a firm advertising its long standing. I say to my friend, "Come on, let's have a look at this." He replies, "I do not see why a lot of people have to get together when they are feeling religious." I answer, "As a Protestant you will never understand." A woman nods emphatic approval. Then I see a sort of proclamation on the wall of the church. It runs, "Soldiers, when you feel you are under the power of the Lord, do not address him directly. The Lord cannot be reached by words. We also strongly advise you not to indulge in any discussions among yourselves concerning the attributes of the Lord. It is futile, for everything valuable and important is ineffable. Signed, Pope. Name illegible, now we go in." The interior resembles a mosque, more particularly the Hagia Sophia, no seats, wonderful effective space, no images, only framed texts decorating the walls, like the Quran texts in the Hagia Sophia. One of the texts reads, "Do not flatter your benefactor." The woman who had nodded approval bursts into tears and cries, "Then there's nothing left." I reply, "I find it quite right," but she vanishes. At first I stand with a pillar in front of me and can see nothing. Then I change my position and see a crowd of people. I do not belong to them and stand alone. But they are quite clear, so that I can see their faces. They all say in unison, "We confess that we are under the power of the Lord. The kingdom of heaven is within us." They repeat this 3 times with great solemnity. Then the organ starts to play and they sing a Bach fugue with chorale. But the original text is omitted, sometimes there is only a sort of coloratura singing, then the words are repeated, everything else is paper, meaning that it does not make a living impression on me. When the chorale has faded away, the gemütlich, pleasant, part of the ceremony begins. It is almost like a student's party. The people are all cheerful and equable. We move about, converse, and greet one another, and wine, from an Episcopal seminary, is served with other refreshments. The health of the church is drunk and, as if to express everybody's pleasure at the increase in membership, a loudspeaker blares a ragtime melody with the refrain, "Charles is also with us now." A priest explains to me, these somewhat trivial amusements are officially approved and permitted. We must adapt a little to American methods. With a large crowd such as we have here, this is inevitable. But we differ in principle from the American churches by our decidedly anti-ascetic tendency. Thereupon I awake with a feeling of great relief.
There are, as you know, numerous works on the phenomenology of dreams, searching for meaning, with the aim not only of explaining but also of understanding the experience, but very few that deal with their psychology. This for the obvious reason that a psychological interpretation of dreams is an exceedingly ticklish and risky business. Freud has made a courageous attempt to elucidate the intricacies of dream psychology with the help of views which he gathered in the field of psychopathology. Consult footnote 14 of Jung's book about Freud's tractate. Much as I admire the boldness of his attempt, I cannot agree either with his method or with its results. He explains the dream as a mere facade behind which something has been carefully hidden. There is no doubt that neurotics hide disagreeable things, probably just as much as normal people do. But it is a serious question whether this category can be applied to such a normal and worldwide phenomenon as the dream. I doubt whether we can assume that a dream is something other than it appears to be. I am rather inclined to quote another Jewish authority, the Talmud, which says, "The dream is its own interpretation." In other words, I take the dream for what it is. The dream is such a difficult and complicated thing that I do not dare to make any assumptions about its possible cunning or its tendency to deceive. The dream is a natural occurrence, and there is no earthly reason why we should assume that it is a crafty device to lead us astray. It occurs when consciousness and will are to a large extent extinguished. It seems to be a natural product which is also found in people who are not neurotic. Moreover, we know so little about the psychology of the dream process that we must be more than careful when we introduce into its explanation elements that are foreign to the dream itself. The first part of the dream is a serious statement in favor of the Catholic Church. A certain Protestant point of view, that religion is just an individual experience, is discouraged by the dreamer. The second, more grotesque part is the Church's adaptation to a decidedly worldly standpoint, and the end is a statement in favor of an anti-ascetic tendency which would not and could not be backed up by the real Church. Nevertheless, the dreamer's anti-ascetic priest makes it a matter of principle. Spiritualization and sublimation are essentially Christian principles, and any insistence upon the contrary would amount to blasphemous paganism. Christianity has never been worldly, nor has it ever looked with favor on good food and wine, and it is more than doubtful whether the introduction of jazz into the cult would be a particular asset. The cheerful and equable people who peripatetically converse with each other in more or less Epicurean style remind one much more of an ancient philosophical ideal which is rather distasteful to the contemporary Christian. In the first and second part, the importance of masses or crowds of people is emphasized. Thus the Catholic Church, though highly recommended, appears coupled with a strange pagan point of view which is irreconcilable with a fundamentally Christian attitude. The actual irreconcilability does not appear in the dream. It is hushed up as it were by a cozy, gemütlich, pleasant, atmosphere in which dangerous contrasts are blurred and blended. The Protestant conception of an individual relationship to God is swamped by mass organization and a correspondingly collective religious feeling. The insistence on crowds and the insinuation of a pagan ideal are remarkable parallels to things that are actually happening in Europe today. Everybody was astonished at the pagan tendencies of modern Germany because nobody knew how to interpret Nietzsche's Dionysian experience. Nietzsche was but one of the thousands and millions of Germans yet unborn in whose unconscious the Teutonic cousin of Dionysos, Wotan, came to birth during the Great War. See more information on footnote 15. Those Germans were by no means people who had studied Thus Spake Zarathustra, and certainly the young people who resurrected the pagan sacrifices of sheep knew nothing of Nietzsche's experience. That is why they called their god Wotan and not Dionysos. In Nietzsche's biography you will find irrefutable proof that the god he originally meant was really Wotan, but, being a philologist and living in the 70s and 80s of the 19th century, he called him Dionysos. Looked at from a comparative point of view, the two gods have much in common. Seek more information in the Jung's essay titled Wotan with a Nostradamus quote as intro of the essay. There is apparently no opposition to collective feeling, mass religion, and paganism anywhere in the dream of my patient, except for the Protestant friend who is soon reduced to silence. One curious incident merits our attention, and that is the unknown woman who at first backs up the eulogy of Catholicism and then suddenly bursts into tears, saying, "Then there's nothing left," and vanishes without returning. Who is this woman? To the dreamer she is a vague and unknown person, but when he had that dream he was already well acquainted with her as the unknown woman who had frequently appeared in previous dreams. As this figure plays a great role in men's dreams, it bears the technical name of the Hanima, with reference to the fact that, from time immemorial, man in his myths has expressed the idea of a male and female coexisting in the same body. Such psychological intuitions were usually projected in the form of the divine syzygy, which is a conjunction or opposition, especially of the moon with the sun, the divine pair. Or in the idea of the hermaphroditic nature of the creator. Edward Maitland, the biographer of Anna Kingsford, relates in our own day an inner experience of the bisexual nature of the deity. Then there is Hermetic philosophy with its hermaphrodite and its androgynous inner man, the Homo Adamicus, who, although he appears in masculine form, always carries about with him Eve, or his wife, hidden in his body. As a medieval commentator on the Hermetis Tractatus Aureus says, for more information search the book, The Story of Anna Kingsford and Edward Maitland and of the New Gospel of Interpretation. And also you may search more information of the author named Dominicus Nosius. See also the Anima Animus archetype. The anima is presumably a psychic representation of the minority of female genes in a man's body. This is all the more probable since the same figure is not to be found in the imagery of a woman's unconscious. There is a corresponding figure, however, that plays an equivalent role, yet it is not a woman's image but a man's. This masculine figure in a woman's psychology has been termed the animus. One of the most typical manifestations of both figures is what has long been called animosity. The anima causes illogical moods, and the animus produces irritating platitudes and unreasonable opinions. Both are frequent dream figures. As a rule, they personify the unconscious and give it its peculiarly disagreeable or irritating character. The unconscious in itself has no such negative qualities. They appear only when it is personified by these figures and when they begin to influence consciousness. Being only partial personalities, they have the character either of an inferior woman or of an inferior man, hence their irritating effect. A man experiencing this influence will be subject to unaccountable moods, and a woman will be argumentative and produce opinions that are beside the mark. The negative reaction of the anima to the church dream indicates that the dreamer's feminine side, his unconscious, disagrees with his conscious attitude. The disagreement started with the text on the wall, "Do not flatter your benefactor," which the dreamer agreed with. The meaning of the text seems sound enough, so that one does not understand why the woman should feel so desperate about it. Without delving further into this mystery, we must content ourselves for the time being with the statement that there is a contradiction in the dream and that a very important minority has left the stage under vivid protest and pays no more attention to the proceedings. We gather, then, from the dream that the unconscious functioning of the dreamer's mind has produced a pretty flat compromise between Catholicism and pagan Joie de vivre, that means, joy of living. the product of the unconscious is manifestly not expressing a fixed point of view or a definite opinion, rather, it is a dramatic exposition of an act of reflection. It could be formulated perhaps as follows: now what about this religious business? You are a Catholic, are you not? Is that not good enough? But asceticism, well, even the church has to adapt a little: movies, radio, spiritual 5 o'clock tea and all that. Why not some ecclesiastical wine and gay, a word that used to mean a happy back then, acquaintances? But for some secret reason this awkward mystery woman, well known from many former dreams, seems to be deeply disappointed and quits. I must confess that I find myself in sympathy with the anima. Obviously the compromise is too cheap and too superficial, but it is characteristic of the dreamer as well as of many other people to whom religion does not matter very much. Religion was of no concern to my patient, and he certainly never expected that it would concern him in any way. But he had come to me because of a very alarming experience. Being highly rationalistic and intellectual, he had found that his attitude of mind and his philosophy forsook him completely in the face of his neurosis and its demoralizing forces. He found nothing in his whole Weltanschauung, word that in English is worldview and in Spanish cosmovision, that would help him to gain sufficient control of himself. He was therefore very much in the situation of a man deserted by his hitherto cherished convictions and ideals. It is by no means extraordinary that under such conditions a man should return to the religion of his childhood in the hope of finding something helpful there. It was, however, not a conscious attempt or decision to revivify his earlier religious beliefs. He merely dreamed it, that is, his unconscious produced a peculiar statement about his religion. It is just as if the spirit and the flesh, the eternal enemies in a Christian consciousness, had made peace with each other in the form of a curious mitigation of their contradictory nature. Spirituality and worldliness come together in unexpected amity. The effect is slightly grotesque and comical. The inexorable severity of the spirit seems to be undermined by an almost antique gaiety perfumed with wine and roses. At all events, the dream describes a spiritual and worldly atmosphere that dulls the sharpness of a moral conflict and swallows up in oblivion all mental pain and distress. If this was a wish fulfillment, it was surely a conscious one, for it was precisely what the patient had already done to excess. And he was not unconscious of this either, since wine was one of his most dangerous enemies. The dream, on the other hand, is an impartial statement of the patient's spiritual condition. It gives a picture of a degenerate religion corrupted by worldliness and mob instincts. There is religious sentimentality instead of the numinosum, word that means the evocation of a religious thought, of divine experience. This is the well-known characteristic of a religion that has lost its living mystery. It is readily understandable that such a religion is incapable of giving help or of having any other moral effect. The overall aspect of the dream is definitely unfavorable, although certain other aspects of a more positive nature are dimly visible. It rarely happens that dreams are either exclusively positive or exclusively negative. As a rule, one finds both aspects, but usually one is stronger than the other. It is obvious that such a dream provides the psychologist with enough material to raise the problem of a religious attitude. If our dream were the only one we possess, we could hardly hope to unlock its innermost meaning, but we have quite a number of dreams in our series which point to a remarkable religious problem. I never, if I can help it, interpret one dream by itself. As a rule, a dream belongs in a series. Since there is a continuity of consciousness despite the fact that it is regularly interrupted by sleep, there is probably also a continuity of unconscious processes, perhaps even more than with the events of consciousness. In any case, my experience is in favor of the probability that dreams are the visible links in a chain of unconscious events. If we want to shed any light on the deeper reasons for the dream, we must go back to the series and find out where it is located in the long chain of 400 dream. In a next video I will do an empirical analysis of this dream. Also, as you have may seen, I shared during the whole video some recreations of Jung's patient dream created with artificial intelligence. This AI generated pictures do not resemble at all with how I imagined that the dream would be. Somehow, and in order to do a reference to the writer and director William Peter Blatty, I will share here from the movie The Exorcist 3 a scene that for me it's a reference to the Jung's patient dream. If I'm not wrong, in the book The Exorcist that was the base of the first movie, there is a reference to a Jung's essay titled, on the psychology and pathology of so-called occult phenomena, which I read. And for me was an initiation into Jung's writings. The Exorcist 3 was based in another book, the one called Legion, so I will check it in order to see if that dream of the movie appears in the book, and if so, and also if different, I will compare the three of them. Jung's patient dream, the dream of The Exorcist 3 the movie, and also the dream, if real, of William Peter Blatty book titled Legion. You will also see in this video someone playing the tarot. That is also a Jung's reference. If you like this video, please thumb up and subscribe.
Your attention, please. Your attention. The 1218 to elsewhere now departing through track 11. All passengers boarding proceed to the gate.
Get out of this damn Casablanca!
Yes, it is. No, it isn't. It hits the line. It's out of bounds. The line is inbound. No, it's not. It's out. It hit the dirt.
Earth, come in, please. Can you hear us? We are attempting to communicate. Come in, please.
The living are dead.
We come here first. Lieutenant! How you doing, Lieutenant?
I'm so sorry you were murdered, Thomas. I miss you.
I miss you too.
I wonder if both of us are dreaming this.